Hey guys, Todd Anderson here with another Magic Online video for your viewing pleasure. Today we're going to be playing my take on Jeskai Black. Now, I might be the only person right now who is shying away from Mantis Rider, but honestly, I'm just not really impressed by the guy. He is a creature that requires an answer. He does get you some free wins, but for the most part, Mantis Rider is just a card that is a nuisance rather than an actual way to win the game. I've read a lot about how versions that feature Mantis Rider and Tasigur have a significantly different game plan than what I want to implement. And, together, those two creatures coupled with the spell, other counter spells, and removal can close the game pretty fast on your opponent. Today we're going to be playing my version that shies away from those creatures and is just trying to grind my opponent into the dirt so that I can eventually kill them with Dragon Master Outcast. Also, cats. So this version, you'll notice the major difference between my version and other people is that I'm playing 4 copies of Dig Through Time. The Dig Through Times are just the reason to play this deck, in my opinion. It's a card advantage spell that just keeps on giving. Whenever you get to Dig Through Time into like a removal spell or an Ojai's command and another Dig Through Time, if your opponent doesn't have any board presence, it's going to be really tough for them to come back from that position. Dig Through Time can save you when you're behind by helping you find like 2 spells that can help you get out of the situation. There are even occasions where if you're a little short on mana and you have a bunch of action already, you can Dig Through Time into some more lands. I like Dig Through Time a lot more than Treasure Cruise, just because I want very specific things each time I cast a big draw spell, as opposed to raw card advantage. We can't do a lot with our mana past like 6 or 7 mana, other than like Soulfire Grandmaster, and I think the raw card advantage for Treasure Cruise is not as good as the pinpoint card selection from Dig Through Time, as well as the ability to just play like some sweet singletons, both main deck, sideboard. Although we don't have any true singletons in our main deck from how we've built it. Another key difference is that I'm trying out a few copies of Despise in this list. Gideon and some, creatures can be problematic, especially since we don't have Mantis Rider. We can't pressure Planeswalkers too easily outside of like Soulfire Grandmaster, maybe a counter spell or some burn spells, or just an Utter End. But having access to Despise helps us take care of that early on. It also gives us a cheap thing to interact with our opponent if they're trying to play like this long developing game centered around stuff like Den Protector. And with Jace Vryn's Prodigy, we can actually flip it, flash back the Despise, and have an aggressive card as opposed to like a counterspell to interact with them. I think Despise is better than Duress just because of how creature dense the format is right now. Even the ramp decks, they center around Ugin and Ulamog, so being able to take one of those from their hand could buy you enough time to actually close out the game. But we'll get more to that matchup in a minute. This is Pumpkin, by the way. Pumpkin's great. Our deck, we have 4 copies of Fire Impulse and 2 Roast. These are burn spells that don't really attack Planeswalkers or players, but they're both really good with Soulfire Grandmaster because they can gain you more life than a normal burn spell would, like a Wild Slash. But they also just handle creatures that other burn spells might not be able to deal with. I think Roast is better than Valor Stance because it's a little more versatile, even though it's not instant speed. Like you can use a Roast on a Warden of the First Tree, as well as an Anafenza, as opposed to Valor Stance, which like only kills Anafenza and Rhino. I think Roast is the card I was really missing when I played this deck a few weeks back at the Open in Philadelphia. I've had them in my deck before, but I was having a little trouble with Hangerback Walker, but I think people are starting to shy away from Hangerback Walker a little bit, and it doesn't really pressure us too much. So usually if it's in play, I just ignore it for a little while, and then eventually I can find an Utter End to actually exile it so they don't get Thopters. I like Roast over Silk Wrap just because Silk Wrap kind of sits in play. You get blown out by Dramoka's command a lot, and it just doesn't really do what you need it to do. Plus, Roast works with Soulfire Grandmaster very well. The turn 4 play of Soulfire plus Roast just puts you back at your starting point. against most things. The rest of the deck you've mostly seen before. We have the 4 Jaces, we have 4 Crackling Dooms. We're only playing 2 Kolaghan's Command as opposed to the normal 3. It's mostly a concession to the fact that I don't think the mirror is super popular or prevalent right now, and Kolaghan's Command is insane in the mirror. Don't let me undersell it. It is unbelievable in the mirror. And most of the time when I play the mirror, if I draw Kolaghan's Command, I think I have a pretty big leg up versus however many they draw. Oshai's Command is pretty similar in that regard, where if all you're trying to do is trade resources back and forth, the sheer total number of 2-for-1 cards you draw more than your opponent is going to put you farther and further ahead. We have negates where most people have Dispel. Again, this is a concession to help fight things like Gideon, but we still want a cheap counterspell that can interact with Kolaghan's Command against, let's say, the Mirror. You can also counter stuff like Abzan Charm, but mostly it's there for stuff like Gideon. Disdainful Stroke is a lot worse than Negate against stuff like Atarka Red or the Green-Red Landfall deck. They're trying to go pretty big, and being able to counter like a Titan Strength or Temur Battle Rage or even just a removal spell on your Soulfire Grandmaster could be the difference between winning and losing a game. And I don't think the difference is that significant between Disdainful Stroke and Negate against stuff like Abzan Aggro or the like. You know, being stuck with a Negate in your hand against your opponent casting a Siege Rhino does feel pretty bad, but having a more versatile card, or a card that's better in more matchups, as opposed to a card that's, you know, a little more narrow, I think is important. Yeah, rest of the deck, 2 Utter Ends where most people only play 1. I really like having 2 just as a safety valve against Planeswalkers if they're able to resolve them. Since we don't have Mana Strider, I think having a second one is necessary. Mana base, we have a basic Swamp, 3 Mountains because most of our removal is red based, and we very much need either a first or second land to come into play on tap so we can cast Roast or Fire Impulse. And then one each of Plain, Swamp, and Island. And the Swamp is a little awkward sometimes because you know, you don't really want to fetch a Swamp too early in the game, but I think having access to the Swamp is good. Just being able to go, like, if you have a battle land in your opener like a Prairie Stream, you can go Prairie Stream into Mountain Swamp and cast Crackling Doom. Whereas any of your other lands, you would have to fetch like another dual land to be able to do that correctly. Anyway, sideboard is pretty stock for me at this point. I haven't changed a single card actually from or maybe I changed one card. Yeah, I had like a Disdainful Stroke main deck last time, and then in place of that, I had a Virulent Plague. But the Bant Tokens deck and the Esper Tokens deck are falling a little bit out of favor, I think. So I don't know if the Virulent Plague is actually necessary. We could add it. I don't know what I would cut. I think the 2 Painful Truths are very good against the Mirror or any control deck trying to grind you out. They are particularly good in any matchup where Despise is also good, because you have a little more a couple more ways to use your mana in the early turns and empty your hand. But the Infinite Obliterations are mostly there just for the Ulamog ramp matchups, because if you can take care of Ulamog, it's not that hard. Man, cats are going nuts. If you can take care of the Ulamogs, all you have to beat at that point is Ugin and maybe like some Guy's Revenges or whatever, but you're going to be so flush with removal against them because all you can really side out is Roast and Fire Impulse. You can't really side out anything else, and you kind of need Crackling Doom just in case. So yeah, I like to board out Roast and Fire Impulse in that matchup, bring in like Infinite Obliteration, Disdainful Stroke, and Mastery of the Unseen, I think. Sometimes Painful Truce, just depending on how their deck is built. But the 3 Obliterations means that you just drop more often against the decks with Ulamog, because if you don't take their Ulamog, you have no way to win the long game. And since we're not playing Mana Strider, we have no way to beat Ulamog in the long game. It's just going to grind out all of our lands, or all of our Flip Jaces, or all of our Soulfires, or Dragon Master Outcast, and they can chain them so easily off of Sanctum of Ugin, I believe is the land that does it, and you just can't really do anything. And I had 2 for a while, and then I finally pulled the trigger and played 3 at the Open in Philadelphia, and I ended up going 4-1, I think, against the ramp archetype when I lost almost every single game 1. It was bad. Game 1 without obliteration, real bad. Game 2 and 3 with obliteration, a lot better. Anyway, guys, that's Jeskai Black with no Mantis Rider. We'll be right back for some matches. Stay tuned.